I welcome everybody to this first day one webinar. Hopefully everyone can see the screen. It should currently be a PowerPoint. The agenda today we're really going to focus on addressing the concept design elements of Fusion 360 and get into focusing on starting with freeform modeling. And that's what we're going to be doing most of today. There are additional exercises that we won't be able to go through. Tomorrow, we will get more into the mechanics, the traditional mechanical side of things. I've planned a break partway through, but otherwise, we will be here for 4 hours and it will be pretty intense, but also flexible. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. We'll try to address them on the way through the day. So, first of all, what I want to do is a bit of an overview on Fusion 360 and the interface. First of all, I just want to do a little bit of an overview of some of the elements of Fusion 360 for people that have used Fusion a little bit. The interface is fairly straightforward, with the application bar being a minimal resource in Fusion 360 versus some of the other tools that you might be used to using. But there are still some important elements. We will look at the browser versus the timeline, which can take a bit of getting used to. Also, all the resources that you'll find will be shared with you, and it's actually built into Fusion. But what we're going to be doing, we're going to be going through this interface. So with that, let's switch over to Fusion. I currently have a default setup in Fusion. With this model that we've got that we're looking at the moment, we're in the Sculpt environment. So up in the top left-hand corner, we've got a Show Data panel. This is where we have all our different projects that we can work on. So one thing with Fusion 360 being semi-cloud-based is that you can create folders, or you can create projects that you can share with other people. So if I was to go into I think I've created one just then called New Project. I can in this area upload file data sets that I can share with people. I can go inside them folders and upload information that I want to share with people. I can go to people and I can invite people and their Fusion accounts. And it's this ability to invite people to those projects which makes Fusion, it's a huge advantage for Fusion 360. The integrated collaboration of Fusion 360 really is a fantastic thing. It opens up opportunities for the target audience to reach out to people with more expertise. So if there's something that you're not sure on, you'll see it on the forums. Someone will have a problem with the design. They'll reach out on the forum, and they can actually then invite experts to their file to look at their problem, and then collaboratively, together, they can overcome that problem and develop and learn from each other. And to be able to contribute to their design and get their expertise without being in the same building, region, or even country. We'll be working primarily from the projects folder. So what we've got built into Fusion, right down at the very bottom, there are a number of sample files and folders that we've got in there, projects. At the very bottom, we've got one called Workshop and Events. Now, you may find resources on the internet and learning paths on the internet that refer to various projects that we have here. I think there's been the Sheet Metal Challenge was one of them. The one that we're going to be working from over these next 2 days is the adoption path. So if I double click on the adoption path, and then we've got some various folders in there that we'll be dipping into out of as we go along. It's only a read-only project though. So the folders and the files that are in there are read-only. So whilst we're working in, if we want to save anything or save any changes that we do, we need to then save it to another project that we need to set up. Again, These are very much like working through these folders is just like navigating through Mac Finder and Microsoft Explorer files. We can close this data panel either by clicking on the Close Data Panel X or just by Hide Data Panel next to it. If we click on that, it disappears to the side again. Other elements in the application bar are File. So up at the top there, we've got File, and we've got some few options down there. So you can start from a new design, start from a file, drawing template, save as, export. Really quite straightforward. If someone wants to share a Fusion 360 design, but want to do it offline, the export option is really the primary tool to go to. So this one, if you want to go into the export there, you can actually export offline. What a lot of people try and do is export, and it will take them, or they want to download a file, they then have to go to A360 interface. But through this method, you can actually download to your hard drive, and there are a number of different extensions: IGES file, SAT file, STEP file, and obviously the archive file for Fusion that you can save to. You can save it to the cloud. If you save into your computer, you've then got the file navigation button where you can navigate to your hard drive and save it where you want to do. The Save Archive file will only work directly from this interface. If there are no other designs linked to it, or if it does not have other types of files, drawings linked to it. So if it's purely just a design file, you can export it from that point. If you want to export a design to include any of the linked drawings or files, you'll need to do that through the A360 interface. Otherwise, all the other file types can be addressed from this export tool. You can also save into another project or save to your computer. So from this, I can save it so I can work offline with it. The toolbar itself will change. So this across here at the minute, these particular tools here are all relevant to the Sculpt environment. If I was to just change the model environment, you'll notice that the tool set there will change. For example, later today we'll go into the rendering workspace, and what you'll see is the toolbars will change and the environment will change on that workspace. This just stops having a lot of buttons that you won't use on display, because when you put in a different environment, what you don't want to do is have a load of buttons there that are irrelevant for that workspace. So Fusion is quite intuitive, and the developers have removed the buttons that you're not going to use in that workspace to make it easier for the designer, for the user. Looking at some of the other interface options, there is a shortcut menu that is available and changes with your environment if you press the S key. So whilst I'm hovering over the canvas, if I press the S key itself, you'll see I've got a little shortcut box that appears. So at the minute there's extrude in there, there's fillet in there. I can search for other ones. So I wanted the hole tool, just put hole. Now whilst I can click on that there, if there is an arrow up icon at the side, if I click on that, it will add it to this shortcut toolbar. And if I don't want it in that shortcut toolbar, so again, S displays it. If I click and drag, I can just drag it off. So again, if I didn't want that fillet on there, click on it, drag it off the toolbar, and it removes it from the toolbar. So to add it on, it's the up arrow. To remove it, just drag it off that toolbar. So along with the customization of the toolbar, let's look at the customization of the overall interface. By going to Preferences, we can look at changing some of the settings. I don't know if everybody knows, but up at the top right-hand side of the menu bar, I've actually got screencasting there, which you can record the work and the keystrokes that you're doing Fusion. So there's a lot of people use that for creating video resources. They click on that and then they can record the strokes and the design or the activities that they want to do in Fusion, and it will record keystroke by keystroke, mouse click by mouse click, exactly what they've done within the model. The next one, job status. If we click on this, this tells me now that I'm working online. You can click that and work offline if you're going on a train journey somewhere that you've not got the internet access. But what also it will tell you, if there's an update with Fusion, when it connects in the cloud, you'll get a status coming up saying that it's starting to download the latest update and when it's ready to reinstall the new update, so you can actually shut it down, and it gives you that information there. Where we've got our name up in the corner here, if I click on that and we can go to preferences, this opens up our preference dialog box. So we've got a lot of options here. So we've got the general there. A lot of machinists prefer the Z-axis to be the up axis. So you've actually got this option here to change from Y up to Z up. For people coming from SolidWorks, Inventor, or Alias, you can change the pan, zoom, and orbit shortcuts for the mouse and keyboard, and they can set to the one that you are used to. I prefer to get to know the tool itself and the new shortcuts, but anything to make more people comfortable if they are used to working differently. And for the Inventor user, using the free orbit instead of the constrained orbit might be more comfortable. So again, it's up to the user themselves, but I prefer, if you're actually using a new tool, is to use it as it should be used and not try and fit that new tool around how you've always done it, how you've always used Inventor, how you've always used SolidWorks. And I find that, better if you can get them to do that. We also have options for material. So we come down here, what the appearance will do. So if people are always going to be working in plastics, they can change the setup here. Or if they don't, just like the default appearance. Because it could be that all day long you're using the same material for your different designs. And what you don't want to do is always come up with the same default metal steel material. So they've got the options there to actually change its appearance and change the actual material that you're working with. The last thing I want to touch on in the preferences is the preview. Right down at the very bottom here. The ability to sign up to technology previews. So if you can actually show students how Fusion is allowing users to get involved with the leading edge developments of the tool as it evolves. So what you can do, you can see there we've got the PCB feature where the Eagle integrated, and there's a few more that you can click on that and you can apply and you can sign up to it. And it just gives you that chance of being involved with the development of the actual tool itself. On the left, we have the browser. So if I just cancel out of that now, right at the very end of the help bit, you're learning 3. So there's access here to communities, to the gallery. If you want to know what the product roadmap is, it's there. You can also, which is brilliant, submit an idea. So as you're using Fusion, as your students are using Fusion, if you've got an idea that you think, well, actually, this would be great if it was in Fusion. Why can't they do this? Why can't they add this in? You can actually click on that and you could submit that idea. And that idea goes to the development team. And, there's a number of them that have been put in into the roadmap of the development of the actual software itself. What I'm going to do now is just quickly show you some of the navigation tools. A lot of you will probably be used to them to Inventor, but for those people that are new, I'm just going to start a new file, just a new design. And very quickly, all I'm going to do is just go draw a quick sketch on a work plane, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle there. Pops up on my other PC. Stop that sketch, and I'm just going to extrude it, just a very simple, basic rectangle there. What you'll see, as I've actually created that rectangle, down at the very bottom of the screen, we have what we call our timeline in Fusion. So what you can see there, right at the very beginning, I created a sketch. That was the first thing that I did, and it added it in. And then as I then went on and did the extrude, I've now got that simple extrude that's added in. So if I wanted to add a fillet in there very quickly, I can add a fillet. I can box select if I want, and manipulators, I can very easily just add a fillet in there. And again, you'll see it's added it to the timeline at the bottom. If at all I want to go back and change anything, I can actually, if I wanted to change that original sketch and put some dimensions to it, if I either right click in the timeline and go edit sketch, or just double left click, it takes me back to that original sketch. And I can then modify, change it. I'm not putting any dimensions in at the moment. I'm just pulling and stretching, stop sketch, and it will update it. And it's same with the extrusion. Again, straight back into it. I can manipulate, I can put my sizes in, press OK. And at the end of it, I can actually drag this marker right to the beginning of my timeline. Never press play. Obviously, it's only a very short model that I've done, but this will play as we see some more complicated models later on. This builds up the history of how it was created, and you can go back in time and you can add bits into if you've missed something out, you've missed an operation out. So if I wanted to put a hole in here before I did the fillets, I could very quickly go back in the timeline. I could create my hole, just click on there, and just press OK. You'll see it's put that in, and it's just added it in that time. So you can actually keep your history up to the way that you want to approach your design. Again, you've got the ability to play it. So if someone sent you a model and you wanted to view or comment on how they've created it, you can play that timeline. You can play that animation of how it's done. You can get a feel of how they approach the design. It is possible to work without a timeline and create new geometry using direct modeling, but hopefully we will all encourage students to explore the power the parametric modeling offers. So if we go back to our sketch, for anyone using Inventor, you've probably been used to using the marking menu. We've got that again with Fusion. If I right click there, you'll see we've got a marking menu. The marking menu, say in Fusion, it works in a very similar manner, though it has a couple of extra touches to it. For example, the marking menu in Fusion 360 has levels, so I can hover over the sketch tools. So if I right click, hover over the sketch tools, and you notice I get then an array of different pop-ups that come up. So if I wanted then a 2-point rectangle, just go across, straight away I go to my 2-point rectangle tool. And again, in the marking menu, you can still access them with the right-click gesture. So if I went down and to the top left, it picks circles. So first of all, if I just hover down to sketch, you'll see there that's circle. But if I was to right-click down and up, hopefully, what did I get? I didn't get it then. But let's try again. So hold on, cancel. Just got to get it in the right position. So right-click down, up. You can get your circle menu there. So it is quite easy, and it's something that you can get used to using without having to go all the way up to the top toolbars. So you can work there. So that really makes it, you can work the way that you're used to doing. It's just a little more enhanced in Fusion 360. You'll notice the sketch palette on the right rather than a pull down. So when I'm doing sketching, and I'm doing rectangle on here, Clicking on wherever I want it, you'll notice that the sketch palette's here. What we can do here, we can access all the constraints that we might need when we're setting up our sketches. And we've got a vast array here, coincidental, collinear. We've got different options of like the rectangles, drawing the rectangles. So at this stage, when we've not started drawing, we can actually change the type of rectangle. We can say whether we want construction geometry, or we can change the construction geometry. And again, the sketch grid, snaps, we can turn them on and off here. People may think that, if you've got a small screen, that this takes up quite a bit of space. You can minimize it a little bit, but I think when people are getting used to using Fusion, it's best to keep it open as much as possible. Otherwise, people can start getting a little bit confused with where they're up to. Some of the display options that we've got whilst we're in the actual drawing mode at the moment, down at the bottom here, we've got the navigation. Sorry, we'll do display first. So we've got, because I said display, so display settings. If I open up display settings, we've got visual style. And again, shaded, takes off the edges. Shaded with hidden, and you can read all them down there. Wireframe. I always like to use, where I can, most of all the shaded with visible edges, just give you an idea of how my model's coming on. Moving across, we've got grid settings, so we can turn the grid on, turn the grid off, snap to grid on, snap to grid off. We can just very quickly click on there. We can actually change the grid settings if we want by clicking on the menu there. And we can change whether we want incremental move or whether we want to be a soft move. And something I don't tend to use much of, but if you're used to using other softwares, you might like it. You can actually have multi-screens in Fusion. So you can have your different views, and you can click and work in each individual view screen. I tend to use just the one screen as I'm working away. But again, it's what people are happy using. Also, the visual display, we've got environments. So this is where the students, we've got different ones that are built in. We've got dark skies, grey room. Again, I tend to prefer the photo booth. As we're moving it down, effects. You can turn all these effects on. Obviously, the more effects you turn on as you're in the design area, the more computer resources you're using to keep that going. So ground reflections, pots on a ground reflection came on very faintly then. Object shadows, environmental dome. There's a lot that you can actually do in there, but I tend to just keep it pretty plain and simple at this stage. Up at the top, we've got the view cube. Again, very much like Inventor, if you're used to using that. We've got the home view. You can modify, manipulate, rotate around. And again, you've got your y-axis, your z and your x-axis that you can see there. So we've moved back now to our PowerPoint. And the next thing that we're going to be looking at is the persona-based learning path. Not all people have similar jobs or take on similar roles, have the same abilities, or actually any similar interests. Not everyone is going to want training in everything in Fusion 360. As you're probably aware, there's lots and lots of different areas in Fusion 360. And you're probably going to find that if you want the designers, all they want to know is how that they can actually create that shape or that form. Engineers, they'll probably want to know how to stress test and do some analysis on it. They're typically going to want to know the elements that they want to know and to be able to go on from that. So the materials that we'll be working with were constructed in this light. So as we're working through this, the materials have been dedicated to this persona-based learning path. So they're built from the idea that there are a lot of different roles to be played inside of a company. And we will focus on some of these primary roles. For today and tomorrow, we'll be working at the person who is more focused on the form and shape, the designer. For the engineer, we will look at mechanical assembly and touch on analysis. And we will take a really quick look at setting up some of the tool paths tomorrow too. The integrated CAM that is in Fusion 360 I think is excellent. Today, what we will be focusing on is some of the tools that appeal most to the designer. Some of the core competencies for the designer are shown on this slide. Mixed in with these core competencies for the designer is the ability to sculpt, be able to design a shape without limitations. If you work with customers that have industrial designers, there is a good chance that that person is using SolidWorks today. The capabilities of Inventor for industrial design are at least good, if not better than SolidWorks. However, SolidWorks has done a good job of getting involved with industrial design programs at schools over the years. Once customers see the capability of Fusion, they can see how they have been really restrictive in their design programs to really fit the tools of the preferred software they've been using, which is not unusual. But when you see how conceptual design works within Fusion 360, it really opens up the boundaries and their options. So there are a lot of different elements in Fusion 360 that will appeal to this person who might not presently be someone you are working with, or even trying to find within some of your existing accounts. But it is a great opportunity to find new business. Now, one of the bullet items is sculpt versus surface. If any of you did AutoServe for surfacing in Mechanical Desktop and haven't had an opportunity yet to use freeform modeling or the T-spline modeling that is not only in Fusion but also in Inventor, although Fusion 360 just seems to feel, I think, a bit more at home with these tools, this is totally different than traditional surface modeling. It's a very different approach working with the T-spline bodies. What we will be doing today is going through a series of exercises. There's more exercises, and there is an alternative version available that takes an entirely different approach. So if you are starting to run into accounts or opportunities either with companies or individuals and really want to start promoting Fusion 360, it's good to know several different approaches and techniques. What I will be focusing on today will be really just going into the straightforward approach before we go into the tool. So the next thing that we're going to be doing now is we're actually going to be looking at the basics of T-spline modeling. The workflow I'll be following will be to start out with the use of attached canvas, which would be less common in an engineering environment, but extremely common in a design environment. This is where the designer already has a lot of sketch concepts, which have already gone through a number of phases before they would necessarily want to take time to go to 3D. So the designer, he's got his design sheet, he's done a lot of iterations of his design, and it'd be a waste of time for him to put all of them into 3D. But he's now got to the point where he wants to now create this three-dimensional model. It's going to be important for the designer to leverage those sketches, the ability to bring them in. In Fusion 360 terms, it's what we call an attached canvas, which will be just an image file that we are not only able to put in as a backdrop, but we'll be able to properly size. One of the troubles with using other modelers, 3ds Max, Maya, is that people won't necessarily work towards making sure their model is scaled appropriately. In Fusion 360, using the attached canvas, we can make sure that the model is the right size before we start developing 3D. The next phase, once we have that canvas, will be to create a form. The form within Fusion 360 is a step away from the typical parametric monitoring every feature. You will see that there is even a warning when we start to create our form about the history, and we will talk about that more in a second. Then once you have that initial form, the whole subdivisional concept is about creating a basic shape. And as you need to add detail, being able to subdivide the surfaces, to sharpen edges, to add more fine detail to it, but you don't want to have a high number of faces, because this is not only makes the editing process more time consuming, but it can also start to limit the flexibility. And as you explore this type of working, I think you will discover a lot of things true about trying to limit the amount of faces that you're editing and trying to maintain the smooth curvature. Fusion 360's incorporation of T-splines also works on the concept of always maintaining G2 continuity as you are working. You can break that by adding creases that we will take a look at, but is always trying to create, even if it's not a complete 3D model, is always trying to create a watertight model. And as a final note on the bullet points, if the T-spline body is closed, it will automatically develop a solid model, as long as there are no overlaps or flaws in the T-spline body. If the T-spline body is open, it can be modified and converted to a solid. So there's no downside to having to try and keep things closed. Sometimes it actually works a little better if things are opened up and you can reconfigure the connections. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a demonstration. We're going to bring in a canvas of this reciprocating saw. We're going to calibrate our image that we've brought in, and then we're just going to put in a very simple sculpt model and just show some basic manipulations that we can do with that model just to make the handle. So I'm going to go back into the data panel. The one that we're going to go into is conceptual design, sculpt basics, and then we've got a file here called sculpting basics. So that should be loading up. So here we have got an internal model of a saw. This is what this actual saw is what we're going to be working with over the next couple of days, even down to the cam thing on tomorrow afternoon. We'll still be using this particular design set. We have an image. So if I was opening there, we actually have an image that we've got. Now, one thing you can't do is import to the canvas your image from the projects. So it's got to be on your hard drive. So what I've done, I've actually downloaded it already to my hard drive. So I've got it in a folder there. Up in the toolbar, we have insert. There you go. If I click on that, there's a few options. If I go attach canvas, and now what it's doing, it's going to ask me now, where do I want this, first of all, attach as being attached to. And you can see it's the origin planes have highlighted. At the moment, they're looking very small, these planes. One little tip, if you actually zoom out, you can actually easier select these faces, or you can actually go up to and select them from the browser at the side. So if I click on the XY plane, then in my box here, select image, and the image is that one that I wanted, so the saw, and click up. If I go onto my front face now, you'll see that my image has come in quite small. Now, in Fusion yourself, you're going to see these manipulators quite a lot. So we've got these manipulators, and what they will do, these manipulators, easily move it backwards and forwards in the X direction or in the Y direction. We've also got the square. Is actually a planar move. Now this will move it in X and Y, and is a drag. We have an angle manipulator, so we can change the angle of our image. What you'll also notice in the dialog box at the side, you can see that as we move our manipulator, we've also got the dialog there. So we can make that more finite. So if you wanted 11.5, you could type that in and it would make it more accurate a movement. We also have a scale in the X and Y plane there. So if I click on that, it will scale up and down the size of my model. And I've also got options to flip it vertically, horizontally. And if I change the angle back to 0, and move that back, change that to 0. Oops. Right, what I'll do, I've just lost that. So anything you do, anything like this, you'll notice I've got a canvas box at the side there. I can very quickly click on it, right click, I can edit canvas, so I can get that back up again. So I can very quickly just move this around again to be approximately correct. I think it was around about that. Just okay that. Now we've got this in. Now I could try and manually scale it, but what we have got is we know that this is going to be a dimension of 360, around about this dimension. So if we right click on the canvas, you'll see we have calibrate. If I click on calibrate, what Fusion wants me to do, it wants me to indicate 2 points. So I'm going to indicate one around about there, and one just at the back of the handle there. At the minute it's telling me it's 29.5 near. If I put this up to 360 and press enter, you'll notice it now scales up my model. If I then right click and go back to edit canvas, again I've got my manipulators, I can move it around. And what I want to do, I want to try and align as close as I can these two circles here. So if I just pull that, click this, I can very quickly put that roughly into position there, press OK, and then we've got our image. What we can also do with our image, if I go back to edit image, the canvas opacity, we can change that so we can make it so it's darker, lighter. We can actually have it so it doesn't display through the canvas, through the model that's there. If we put the tick in, it displays through. So we can change that, the visibility in there. And if we wanted to change the visibility of our canvas, again, just by clicking on the light bulb icon at the side of it in the browser, we can turn it on or turn it off. If we look at it, you'll see that that canvas is actually sitting on the work plane, on the XY work plane, which is approximately halfway through our model. Our model is actually slightly offset, but for what we're doing, this is perfect for us. So what I want to do now is start to create a simple form. Up in the menus, you will notice I'm in the model workspace at the moment. If I come across, I've got a create form icon. If I click on that, you get an info box. It's telling us we're going to be moving into the Sculpt environment. The reason it gives this is because when you start a form in the Sculpt environment, you see it adds the icon to be able to return to this form and modify it. So back down here, down in the timeline, you'll notice we've got the form icon appearing. But what happens now, once we're in this Sculpt environment, it doesn't track the individual changes, the features, the modifications like we do, like we're in the normal when we're in the model space. So as you're making changes or creating form bodies, it will not track along the timeline. Because as we work through the day, you'll see all the different adjustments that we make, which will make it for a very large timeline and make it very difficult to monitor. So whilst you are in editing the form and in the Sculpt workspace, individual feature tracking is turned off. When you come out of the Sculpt environment, any further features you add in model space will be tracked. For example, once you've done your casing, if you add a hole to it, that whole icon will be added into the timeline later on. Now we're in the Sculpt environment, you'll see the menus on the top bar have changed. So if I go OK, you'll see all the menu sets have now changed. You can see the Create pull down here. We've got quite a few different primitives. So we've got box, plane, cylinder, sphere, etc. going down. We've also got a modify box. We've got options to set up symmetry. We've got some utility menus, and we've also got a sketch menu as well within the Sculpt environment. So as well as the ability to work from sketches, you can use sketches inside the Sculpt workspace. You can see there is even a sketch toolbar inside it. There's also a modify pull down just like in the model workspace, but the commands here are specific to the Sculpt workflow. So you can see we're not trying to use typical solid modeling tools like loft, sweep, etc. to try and build this shape. We're trying to use features and approaches that are specific to this type of modeling to take advantage of it. So when you're looking down here, all these modify tools are different than what we would find in the model workspace. Symmetry is also a big thing. So if you're trying to create both sides of an object, although as you see in these initial steps, we will really start by just focusing on one side, and we'll take the advantage of being able to mirror an object and create inherent symmetry and build out from there. There are also some great utilities in the utilities menu, like being able to convert BREP to a T-spline. So now we're going to create a cylinder primitive. So first of all, I'm going to spin round to the back end of it, and I'm going to create a cylinder primitive. So just like before, it's asking me on what work plane I want to click on. So I'll start on this one. I want to make sure that I've got my snap to grid on because I want to start my cylinder on this center line here. And what I want to do, I'm just going to do it off the model at the moment so you can see what we're doing. So I'm going to click for the center, and as I start dragging out, you can see there I'm getting a dimension dialog box, and I'm going to put that to a dimension of 30 millimeters. And if I just tab out of that a minute, if I now spin around, you see this actually just moved as I move the mouse. So let's turn that back to 30 there. Now as we're in this, because we're creating a cylinder primitive, we have manipulator handles on, so I can pull out the length of it. You'll see there, and I'm going to create that around about 100. So I can actually put either the height in there of 100, or again, in the drop down box here, we've got a height area there, so I can type in 100 there. We also have the option of the number of faces that we're creating in both the length and the diameter. So I could easily, if I wanted to, change that to 16, and it'll create 16 there. If I wanted 6 across there, but also I've got these little handles that I can increase or decrease the number of faces that we're putting in there. So I can very quickly, and what I'm going to do for this is just have the 8x4. I can change the direction, so if I wanted to do, I could have it happening symmetrically from that work plane. So when I pulled out the length, rather than just coming outwards in one direction, I can do it symmetrically. I can set up at this stage mirror symmetry or circular symmetry, and the operation will be a new body. So I just click OK. Let's change our diameter, make sure it is 30. Like it should be, or diameter. So it's 60. Hold on, 60 there. And then OK. So we've now got our T-spline body. It's one of these, like I've said, the less faces we can have at this stage, the better and smoother our model design will be. If we have too many at this stage, our modelling can become very difficult, and it's not the correct approach. So for this initial form, I'm just going to have these 4 and these 8 going round. And it'll become apparent why very shortly. I can change everything just by editing it and going back in, and I can add more detail to this as we go along. But once the initial shape has been placed, the most common command that people use in the Sculpt environment is the edit form, which is either up at the top here, or if I right click, I've got edit form in my marker menu. How edit form works is, edit form has the ability to rotate, translate and scale entities on the T-spline body. So what the T-spline body's got, we've got faces, we've got edges, and we've got vertices, and all are selectable. And you'll notice that whilst we're in the modify edit dialog box, we get these manipulator handles again that we used to. So what we've got there is I can multiple select. So by holding the shift key, I can multiple select these faces, and you'll see that the center of the actual modification moves. Same with edges. If I was to double click an edge, it will select the whole circumference of that edge, or if it's going down the length, double click it, it selects all of it. With the faces, if I select one and then select one adjacent to it, shift select and double click it, it selects all the faces around there. And again, down the length, select one, shift, double select, it will select the full length across. If I was to hover over just one face and double click, it will select the whole body in there. The arrows, so if I just select one face, the arrows here allow you to just translate in one direction only. So that one there is just pulling us in the X direction. You see how all the other bodies are like stretching. I always like to, when I'm talking with students, it's like pulling clay or plasticine. I can pull that up, you know, so I can translate in all 3 dimensions with that. Again, there is no, if you look down at the timeline, there is nothing that's been recorded on this. However, in the undo, you can see it does actually record my steps in the undo, so I can actually, by doing undo there, I can undo back to my original form. The squares, these do in a planar, so picking this one, I can manipulate my body in the Y and X axis, up and across, that way. This one is the ZX, and this one is the ZY. So you can see that there's quite a lot of manipulation that we can do with them. If I just move on to my front view, just to show you these. The flat edges there, these are scaling, but only scaling in one particular direction. So that is scaling in the X direction. This one will scale in the Y direction. If I was to manipulate my view around, there's another one for the Z direction. And the corner one that you select there actually does in both Y and X on this particular one, scaling up and down. And the actual point in the middle will actually scale in all directions. So that point in the middle. And again, we have the manipulation tool here that we can actually spin it round. So we can change and spin that around. Okay, again, every one of these that we've done, you see we'll find in the step there. So I'll just quickly undo all them. So that's our model. That's our modification. We're also looking at the edit form dialog box here. We've got the selection set, so that's just telling us the number that we've actually selected. So one face, that will give us transform mode, multiple, translations, rotation, scaling, the coordinate space you'll find there, selection filter, so if you only want to just pick vertex, if I come off this a minute, you'll see there I can only pick vertex points. I can't pick faces or edge. If I select that to edges, Again, I can only select edges, faces, and so on. All, I can select anything. The body, I can only actually select the full body itself. Object snap, soft modifications. There's some options here, but you really need to know how be very comfortable in this sculpt environment to really get the benefits out of these soft modification options that are in there. I tend to leave that alone myself. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go onto the front face here, and I'm going to pull our object here. If I sort of zoom in a little bit and spin it around and try and fit this around to what we want. Now that actually looks as though it's increased in size from what it was originally intended with the modifications that I've made. You can see very quickly I'm just putting this roughly in position. I might just scale it down just a touch further. And then as we're working here, I can now select, take this off bodies, just onto all. I'm just going to select that edge there, and then moving these manipulators, I can now start pulling this out. If I wanted to pull this out a little bit further, I could pull that out a bit there. Select that edge, by double selecting it, pull that down, and very quickly I can change, maybe spin that around a little bit, pull it round. So just by using these little manipulators, and it takes a little bit of getting used to and getting comfortable with and knowing what each one of these does. If I wanted just to pull that in a little bit itself there, just a single point, I can actually just pick the single point. If I wanted just to select one edge there and pull that across, I can very quickly just pull and manipulate this around. This little model there, and I'll just pull that there. So very quickly using these simple design tools, I can transform and pull and drag the shape to match the handle. If I wanted to, I could actually scale stuff down. So if I double click that, I could scale that down, scale it up. And what it's doing it on both sides. So if I look at this now, it's giving me a bit of a handle shape that's around that in 3 dimensions. It's really quite flexible, and I can change it. At the moment, I'm actually using both sides, so I'm just modifying it on both sides of the model. But later on, what we'll do, we're going to delete one side of this and just work on one side and then mirror it across to make the full sort of chassis. So again, just using simple scale transform, being able to pick these individual edges, these up, and just being able to again edit either by right clicking the edit form. You can very quickly modify and change very quickly what you're actually modeling here and how it might look. A lot of nice flexibility and easy ways to change. Just a completely different way for the designer and engineer to come up with complex shapes without having to deal with having to loft through profiles and doing all that sort of stuff. So let's say I've now finished with this model and I need to finish the form. So one thing we've got to do when we're in the sculpt environment is at some point finish form. There. Now you notice now I've gone back into my model environment, and because of the viewing style, all my edges, lines that define the different face segments have gone, and it's given me a nice smooth profile there. Yeah, you'll see, you know, that the appearance of it's changed. One thing that is important to note is that visual style is important with working with like sculpt environment models. Because if I want to go back now, if I was working in visual style just with shaded, yeah, so it looks really nice, I'm working in a really nice model and it's giving me a nice shaded pattern. If I wanted to go back and edit this form, If I go down to the timeline and double click, again I've got the warning telling me that I'm going back into the Sculpt environment. But I'm now in the Sculpt environment, ready to edit my form. But it doesn't look as though I've got any edges or faces to select. And that is purely down to the visual style. Because I'm only showing shaded, I'm not showing. When visual style, go with visible edges. I've now got my edges back on. So when you're working with students and with individuals, and they're going from the Sculpt environment to the render environment to the model environment, if they're flipping from one to the other, if they get the visual style wrong in that Sculpt environment, they might be starting asking questions like, where's all my lines gone? Where's my faces gone? And so it's good practice to have that shaded with visible edges on, and that's really the basics of creating a sculpt shaped. So what we're going to do now is I'll just cancel that. I now go back to. We're going to look now at modifying and refining our design. When you're in this context, one thing that is important to the designer is the ability to iterate. When Fusion 360 is creating these shapes, it's doing so from the approach of being able to create a body. One thing you can do is copy that body. So, for instance, if I'm a designer and I've got my basic shape of my handle, a bit like the ones on the screen there, you've got yellow, red and blue. They're basically the same shape, but what you can do, in Fusion, is replicate these shapes. You can copy them multiple times, and then what you can do from that is go into each one and modify it and change it, and make a number of iterations of each one of these particular designs. So from one basic model that you've done, you can create a number of different ideas in a very, very short period of time. So you start out with the same basic concept, duplicate it and iterate and explore different shapes, all in the same place. Because what you can do in Fusion, using the light bulb, you can turn them on and off. So you can actually have multiple handles all in the same design and just turn on and off each one as you're going along, depending on which, to show how each might look. This is another reason why having the unified work environment where all the components are in a single file is very useful. So you can create these multiple bodies without having to create these additional external files and just try different things. It's that exploration and experimentation with the original shape that can be really valuable for the industrial design environment. The other elements for refining control are, we mentioned briefly, the element of subdivision. There are a number of different ways to do that in Fusion 360. The ability to use an actual subdivide tool, as well as being able to insert an edge, where you saw in the cylinder example, where there are a number of edges with 8 sets of faces going around the body, with a sets of edges between them, and then 4 sets of faces going down the length of the body with edges between them at the ends. You can add edges to any individual face, number of faces, by using a tool called Insert Edge. You can also use an Insert Point tool to create 2 endpoints and drop an edge in a non-parallel direction if you want to. We also have tools like Bridge, which is powerful for connecting separate faces, which is another thing where people will often fall into trying to create a complex shape by using a loft approach, by creating these super complex profiles and trying to get the whole thing done in one shot. And it's just a pain. Tools like Bridge allow you to build things out separately and in different pieces, and then connect those separate pieces and bring it all together. Some of the other things we will take a look at are some of the box and display modes, which can help to build up and refine the shape. We will also use some additional tools for bringing things together, such as weld vertices, as well as being able to merge an edge. So what we're going to do now is we're going to load up the second, we're going to go into folder 2, which is create and modify conceptual design. Now this brings us a model that's already got the handle that's been created, and then from that we're going to create an individual face, and we're going to use some tools to create some more faces and edges, and eventually we'll bridge between the handle and the new shape that we've done, and using some more of the techniques we'll build up and finally create this end model part of our handle. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next about half an hour or so. So if I now just close down, don't need to save that, data panel. Now one thing when we're in this data panel here, something that I always get not confused with but do automatically is I'll go back there, and if I go back into that, it'll take me right back to my projects folders, which is a bit of a pain when I only wanted to drop one back in a folder. So if I go workshops and events, if I'm in, where was I before, adoption path, conceptual design, now I was in this folder before. If I hover over that arrow just there and click, you see I can navigate to the other folders just back one. So if I wanted to go into the second one there, if I click on that, it will automatically take me to my second folder. And that's the one I want. So again, we're entering this one was saved in the Sculptor environment, so it automatically loads up in the Sculptor environment. Just OK that, using the X just to remove that display. And if we move on to our front view, so what we can do, you can see now our sort of file structure here. I can fade the canvases if I want. If you want and you think on these new designs now that the canvas is a bit bright or a bit too much in your face, again, in the browser here we've got our canvases. We can open up that. If I right click, edit canvas, I can adjust the opacity of the model there and press OK. So of that canvas. Once again, this is all about construction, but not having to create a lot of construction sketches, but sometimes construction shapes. So under the Create pull-down menu, I'm going to go down and find my Face tool. So if I come down here and I find my Face tool there, click on Face. And the Face tool has a few options. You can create multiple edges, number of sides, different number of sides, number of edges. You can create chain. In this case, I'm just going to do a 4-sided shape. So what I want to do is start roughing the face that these vents are cut into, that run down the side of the body. So I'm going to come probably just underneath, around about here. Again, it's asking me, first of all, what work plane do I want to sketch on? I'm just going to come out a little bit, again using the technique, just come out, click on that work plane, and if I zoom in, and I'm going to take a point around about here, somewhere there. I'm going to come across, again somewhere down there, somewhere around here, and back to there. And now that's created us our face. The face can be modified. I can grab the edges and the points and move them using edit form. But currently the face is on the XY plane, so I've actually drawn this on the XY plane. I don't want it on the XY plane because if I actually look and spin it round, this is my XY plane, and ideally I want the face to be out here somewhere. So if I go to modify, edit form, and then select this face, go back to my right using manipulators, I can actually just pull this out there, this face, and if I pull it out to around about 35 millimeters there. Oops. Spin that round. You can see now I've got it outside of my mortar. Go to modify again. Now if we look on our web, I spin this round. If we look here, it looks as though this particular shape curves in a little bit around here. So I'm going to select this edge, and what I can do in edit form, holding the Alt key or your Option key in Mac, so holding that and then using the arrow key, I'm just actually going to spin this round a little bit, because what I'm going to do is use planar key now. I'll actually use that one there. So I'm going to use this planar. I'm going to press Alt, and what this is actually going to do, it's going to add material, and I can actually pull this round. Release the Alt key, and I go back in and spin it round again a little bit. You'll see that it's actually added a face on, and now I can actually manipulate and move this around. What I'm going to do as well, looking at this front face, I'm going to select that edge. Using this one here, again I'm going to press the Alt key, and I'm going to bring one out and up a little bit. I'm going to release the Alt key, I'm going to press it again, and I'm going to bring one back slightly that way. So I brought it in and out a little bit at the front. So what I've done just by doing that is started to create this particular shape at the front. If I think I've come a little bit too far, I can just select and I can move these around a little bit if I want. I can with this one here, just hold on, let me go back to the front view. If I select that, I can spin it around a little bit, and I can move it and pull it. So you can see, very just like we did before with the cylinder, I'm just pulling it around there. And if I spin it around a little bit, I can actually, if I wanted to, just pick up on that point. I can just move that point in a little bit if I wanted to there. So very quick, and another quite an easy way of doing that. So what I've been able to do using the edit form is add faces and edges and build up this form. Now that I've added these, if I wanted to add something going down a little bit, if I double click that edge, it will actually select that whole edge. We can add a group by keeping down the Alt key and pulling down and out. So what I can do now with this, I just spin it around a little bit by holding this one, the Alt key. I'm going to add a face, but then I can actually just pull it out a little bit. There. Spin it round, and then don't really want that point being there. I actually just move that point back in again. Spin it round. So you can see we're now actually starting to build up this form shape. Again, that point there, I might just move that back in again a little bit. We're starting to build it up. If I look at the back of it now, so if I spin that around here and just look at the back, that point, let's just move that out a bit and just try and match it up to this. So it's again, it's a lot of freehanding and a lot of eye and having a feel of your model, and you can make very finite adjustments with this as we're going along. If you're used to command prompts from Inventor, if you hover whilst you're in a command, your mouse anywhere on the canvas, it'll actually come up with the prompt. So select vertex, edge or face, Alt key to extrude. So just like before, if you're not so sure, where you're up to, just hover the mouse and it'll come up with that command screen for you. Next, what I'm going to do is if I come here, what I want to do is join. If I just pull that around a little bit, I want to join this face here to these two faces here. I want to actually bridge now this bottom bit. The problem with this is that we want to make sure when we use bridge, we are working with either the same number of edges or edges and faces are multiple. So 2 edges can go into 4 edges or 2 faces to 4 faces, but nothing can be multiple of 1. So what I can't do is go from this one face to these 2 faces. So what we're going to do now is use the insert edge tool. I'm actually going to change this to just be from being 1 edge to being 2 edges. If we go up to modify and insert edge, if I only single click on that, it will only pick that edge and it will try and add one here. If I double click, it will pick the line of edges, which will give much more smoother translation. I've got manipulator that I can move that around, but I'm quite happy for it being halfway, which is 0.5. And what you will notice when I click OK, how the shape of the handle changes slightly. There, it's become a little bit more sharper around that point. So we start off with a very smooth profile, and as we start adding these edges, we start adding more detail to the model and then sharpen that transition. So it's actually very easy. So that's why you want to start simple and then start adding the detail to make sure you're going in the right direction. Now we can bridge between these two. So what we can do now, we've got 2 here and we've got 1, 2 on this side as well. Again, up to modify, we've got a bridge tool here. By the way, again with any of these, just like before with the pop-up menu that we could get, if it's got a little arrow at the side of it, you can add it to the top toolbar. So if I wanted to use that bridge, if I clicked on that, it would add it up here to my top toolbar. Again, if I want to get rid of it, if I just click and drag it off, it removes it from it. So again, very simple. You can, set up your interface as you want to work. If I go to bridge, it's asking me now for side 1. So side 1, I'm going to go 1, 2. You'll notice the highlight in yellow. Click on the next arrow to select side 2, 1. This body will be upgraded. Yeah, just OK to that. And 2. What we need to do is make sure that the arrows are pointing in the same direction. The number of faces that we want transitioning between here. What I'm going to do for this is 3. And put 3 between. Here we can preview, or we can't preview, so it's always good to preview so you can actually see whether there's any potential crossing over of meshes or arrows not going in the right direction. Let's go OK. And you'll see there, we've now bridged between these 2 shapes. I'll spin that round. It's actually very, very flat. So what I can actually do here, if I select and then shift, select these 2 there, and just modify and just pull them down a touch like that. And then on these 3 here, I'm just going to modify and pull that up. I don't want to do that one. I wanted to do that. Just like that. Just pull them up a touch just to really smooth that transition of our handle there. You can see how it's now starting to form. Now that we've done that, you'll notice what we need to do now is I want to now pull down. If I look now on the front edge here, I've now got some material that I want to add down here for the bottom of the handle. If I double click that particular edge, you'll notice not only does it just do this bottom edge, but it goes all the way up and round, spin it round up there. And that's because we've got this full handle still at this side. So what I can do, if I just view on my right side, I'm just going to window select this side of the handle, and if I press delete, let's delete form, just cancel that. Window select, press delete. I've now deleted that part of my handle there. Go back into my view. Now if I double click, it's just picking this bottom edge. If I then edit, what I can do is very quickly holding the Alt key again and the arrow manipulator, I'm just going to pull 1 and I'm just going to pull 2, and I'm going to make sure that it is further down below this particular point of my model. And now what we need to do, now that we've done that, is we're going to bring this section and we're going to bring it over the top here and start joining it up to this part. Now to do that, I'm going to double click this top edge. So what I'm going to do, this top edge up here, again, I could, if I wanted to do, select, shift, select the next one. But if I actually just hover over, double click, it will click that top edge. And whilst I'm here, I might just scale it down a little bit. I can spin it round a little bit. Maybe I want to manipulate and move it down just a touch. I'm just, again, making finite little changes to my model to manipulate it. The thing and the beauty with this is that as you're going along is that you can actually just, anytime you wanted to, just modify and change any part that you want. So I'm not happy with something, I can just very quickly just modify and move it. What I'm going to do here, once I've highlight all that top, if I hold my Alt key and use this planar one, so hold the Alt key down, I'm going to add a little bit of material there. I'm going to release. I can then manipulate and spin this round. I can, if I want, scale it down a little bit. And I can move it around. Again, Alt key again, Shift. Add another one. Spin it round. Move it. Modify it. Try not to do it too abruptly. Scale that down just a touch. There. Move that round. And then finally what I'm going to do is just one more. So again, Alt, bring this out to about there. Spin that round as close as near as damn it to being flush there. What we want to do really is get that at 90 degrees. So one thing I'd like to do is square that end and make it vertical. I've got the whole loop selected. One little hint is using this scale. If I hold on that scale there and actually reduce that scale right down to 0. So if I just type in there 0, it will square that up as near as damn it that it can do, and it will then just go for what we need for this modeling that we're doing. Now what I need to do is I now need to start to connect these edges here with these edges here. To do that, let me come over. I'm just going to zoom in. I'm going to actually add just a couple more faces here. So if I come in and then I press the modify edit and just press the Alt key, select and bring up these two faces here, maybe spin them around a little bit, and then I can just zoom in like that, and I might just pull that out a little bit there, pull that a little bit round, touch there. Now rather than use the bridge tool, which would add more faces in here, I just want to directly connect these faces together. So let me just go OK on that. And the tool I'm going to use is the Weld Vertices tool. So if I go into Modify and then Weld Vertices, there, you'll see all the vertices are highlighted. Now what you will notice, if I select that point and I want to weld it to this point here, you'll notice now that my the viewing, it's gone from a smooth model to a square model. It's lost its smoothness, and that's because Fusion's lost the ability to calculate the curvature due to the number of edges not matching, and it reverts back to the spot mode, which shows you two things. The first is the condition of the faces, and the secondly acts as a warning. It's telling me that there's something wrong currently with the model. But if I continue now and select that one to weld to this one, you'll notice now that it's gone back to being smooth. And finally I want that one connecting to that one. So it's now smoothed this area around here, and it's starting to look pretty good. The final bit that we need to do is we need to come across here and create the rest of the handle part of our profile. Now let's just take a minute just to talk about display. We have, so if I just OK that now, if I went back to our edit form tool, at the bottom in selection options under display mode, you can see we have three options. We've got box display, got control frame display, and we've got smooth display. What a lot of designers will want to do once they have made their basic shape is to work in box display. What it does do, it shows where we may have some possible transitions which are more severe than they should be, which you can then modify. It can show areas of overlap or pinch points and where there is potential problems. We also have a control frame. It shows a skeleton around the body like box mode, but shows you also the curvature. What I want to do is add a few more faces more that will match up with the existing body. So I'm going to go back to my smooth display because that's what I need to do. And I'm going to pick and select one and shift select two edges there. So I've got them two edges. Then holding the Alt key, I'm going to just pull out one there, one there, so they roughly sort of align with the things that I need to do there. Yeah, so they're roughly aligned. Changing the view. So if I now was to change this, you'll see there's quite a bit of a difference in the Z between these two. But actually, I'm not actually too bothered about that. I could do some adjustments to these, but for this, I'm just gonna do a merge edge. So if I OK that, I zoom back in, spin it around a little bit. So if I go click off to get rid of the selection there, modify, merge edge, and what I'm going to do is go side 1, 1, 2, 3, there, for edge 2, 1, 2, 3, there. If I now press OK, voila, it's now merged the edges. Again, it's not quite tight, but what I can do now is I can select, I can modify, and I can pull out my shape however I want it. So I can now use the manipulation tools to manipulate the body of my shape here. You'll see it's created quite a complex solution through these faces, but it's brought the body together. So if I actually look at that three-dimensional view again, where we had that quite complex shape, you'll see there it's brought on quite nice, quite well together. And again, it's starting to look pretty good and a bit more like what we need it to look like. The final bit that we need to do with this now is we need to prepare this model for mirroring. So what we want to be able to do eventually is create this model here and mirror it that we've done. And what you'll see at the moment, if I look around here, a lot of these surfaces here, or edges should I say, don't all sit exactly on the plane, the center plane that we need. So what we can do, we've got a tool which is called the flatten tool. This will allow us to align all the edges that we select to either another edge, a plane, or an object that we want to align it to. If I start the flatten tool, so if I go modify and then go to flatten, you'll see what it does. It picks up all the vertex points and it allows me to select the vertex. So if I spin this round, the only thing is I would have to go around each one of these vertex and select them all before then moving on and selecting what plane I'm selecting to and the direction that I'm going in. Here's a little tip, something that's great for classroom. Before I start the flatten tool, if I first of all double select that internal edge there, so that one, and then shift and double select that edge, and then start the flatten tool. So I now go flatten now, there. You'll notice that it's already highlighted all the vertex points that we need to select. I can then select, I'll just use that technique again of zooming out, that point, that plane, there, and it's now flattened all that face to that plane. So I press OK, it's now flattened it. So that's just a little tip. Just select the edges first and then go to the flatten tool. You'll now see that all these are now aligning up on this face. So we're nearly at our completed overall basic shape. However, looking at the top, if I was to look at this top now here, you'll notice that that is quite a sharp point. So if I was to mirror it, it will look quite sharp again coming down. So that's not what we want. But the thing is, we don't have to worry about that with Fusion, because Fusion will actually overcome this when we set it up and do the symmetry option. And we can actually do this in the symmetry mirror duplicate option. So duplicate, it asks me what T-spline body do I want to select. So I can actually just select that T-spline body. What mirror plane? So again, just like before, I just need to select a mirror plane. This time if I just come in here and it's the XY plane there, you'll notice how this is smoothed over. If I press OK, I've now got the body of my model. So it makes it very easy to model a form and not have to worry about the complex transition, making it so much easier and such a good quality look. And the other benefits is that if I decide to make a modification, you'll notice this green line that's going through. That's our line of symmetry. So if I was to make if you look there, there's probably something I need to pull out around here. You'll notice it's already selected it on that side. We'll modify. As to pull it out a lot, it would automatically pull it out on that side as well. So that's inherent symmetry that it's set up. So it makes it very easy to modify, very easy to model a form, not have to worry about the complex transitions. And I think it gives it a right good look as well. So I was to OK that and then finish form, you'd see now the type of shape that we've we're coming up with. You can see obviously the bits where we need to modify it slightly when the motor's coming through. But again, to do that, you just double click in the timeline. It takes you back into the edit form. He says, edit form. Yep, and then we can just click on wherever we need to do, maybe even just that point, modify, and just pull it out. And you can actually see it starting to modify and change it. It's a pretty simple, not too complex tool to use, and it gives a great looking shape that you can actually quite match to a freehand sketch.